So the first time we talked about shame, kind of like, what is it? And then we talked a little bit about what the sources of shame were. We talked about a lot of those. And today I just wanted to talk kind of briefly about how can we know if shame is our problem? Okay. And so I just wanted to actually share an excerpt from my book, Healing Shame, about what shame looked like in my own life, because that was one of the ways that I figured out like what was going on. And so I'm just going to read from the quote. I had become increasingly aware of the uncomfortable physical reactions. In parentheses, I had a flushed face. I would get a flushed face and a queasy stomach. And this is not a quote, but to me, I call this the hot flush of shame, which is I would get this when I was in the depths of shame, or when shame would, grab me. What would happen is that I would feel like a hot flush starting in the pit of my stomach, and then it would just kind of rise up. And I felt like when it got here, my face would be completely flush. And I'm not sure if my face was flushed or not, or if my face was red, if anybody could notice it, but I could feel it, okay? So I had become aware of that. And I was having that reaction whenever I made a mistake, and whether I made a small mistake or a big mistake, I was having that. Or if I did anything that I thought might lead to any type of reprimand, I could see clearly that I was a 50-year-old woman having the reaction of a 5-year-old to anyone who I thought could point a finger at me and say I had done something wrong. Another facet of my shame in my life was the constant worrying about what people thought about me. I had an ever-present and underlying and unspoken fear of not being good enough. It was as if all my life I had been living in a slum that I would leave from time to time to go to the nice, clean neighborhood down the block. At first for short times, then for longer and longer periods of time, but inevitably, I would end up at some point back in the dump. The sight of it would make me sick, but I did not know how to leave it completely behind. So feeling less than, not good enough, and like a second-class citizen was the theme of my life. I would even say that it was interesting because I noticed that there was this second-class theme in my family, and I've talked about generational shame, and I realized that my mom was the second wife of my father, and I was the second wife of my husband, and my sister is the second wife of her husband. And so there was kind of this second-class thing coming down, and that was just like from my mother on. It was kind of weird, but I don't know that means anything, but I just noticed that there was this theme of being second that was not good. And so what are some of the symptoms of shame? So the symptoms of shame can vary from person to person and in degree, and it could be manifested in different ways. And this is not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the things that I've observed are the symptoms that I've noticed and I believe are would indicate shame. Because this is, for me, a deep sense of embarrassment after making a mistake, no matter how small, and leading to self-condemnation. And for me, this embarrassment, like if I made a mistake, I mean, it would literally take me days to talk myself out of the embarrassment and the shame. So I'd be like second guessing is part of that. Okay. And second guessing is kind of, I coulda, shoulda, the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, we say in New York. I should have done this. I could have done this. I would have done this. And, but it would literally, I mean, I'd spend days just trying to talk myself out of it and pray through it. And so one of the differences, and we'll talk about that when we talk about healing from shame, is that when I got healed from that, I didn't take days. I mean, it was like minutes, seconds to get over it. Another symptom that I had was this constant worrying about what other people thought about me. So if you find yourself constantly worrying about what other people think of you, and being perfectionist, that's also another symptom of shame. Because if you have to do everything perfectly, there's a shame issue going on. A compelling need to please others, which may lead to an inability to say no. And we know that boundaries teachings talk a lot about that. If you're people pleasing and you can't say no, chances are really good there's shame in your life. A fear of sharing our deepest thoughts and feelings, even with those closest to us. And this ends up leading to isolation. So there's this, I can't share, I can't be vulnerable. And if I'm sharing and if I'm vulnerable, there's going to be dire consequences. A sense of insecurity that we seek to cover up. So you're insecure, but you've got to cover it up. And what happens is that if you're covering it up, what will happen is either one or two is extremes. And one extreme is excessive pride, and you see people, when you see people who are prideful and who are always boasting about what they do and stuff like that, and you think, oh, that person has so much self-confidence. I never think that anymore. I just think to myself, that person is extremely insecure, because if you have to keep boasting about yourself and saying how great you are, you got a problem, and most likely it's shame. But of course, you have the other end of the spectrum, which is the false humility, and it's putting yourself down. Oh, it's what, Christians sometimes call this worm theology. It just drives me nuts when, I remember one time somebody came up in a church service that I was at and started talking about what a worm they were. And I was like cringing in my seat thinking, why is this guy talking about himself like he's a worm? He's so insecure. We are not worms, okay? So insecurity is a symptom of shame. Lauren Cunningham, the founder of YWAM, talks about true humility. And so true humility, he says, is a willingness to allow ourselves to be seen by God and by others, okay? And I believe that true humility is a right view of ourselves. It's like, I'm not a worm, but I'm not this great person. I'm a child of God, and I do good, I do bad, but I am essentially loved by God, okay? Shame is an enemy to humility, because if true humility is not going to, and shame don't coexist, okay? I mentioned the physical symptoms that I had. So if you're having actual physical symptoms that occur each time you make a mistake or feel embarrassed, that's a symptom. So blushing, queasy stomach, or any other unpleasant physical sensation that you would have every time, notice the patterns, notice what's happening to your body. If you make a mistake or you do something wrong, or somebody offers you constructive criticism that you take badly, or any kind of criticism and you take it badly, what's happening in your body? Do you get a headache immediately? Or do you, like me, do you get like this thing in the pit of your stomach? Or do you start to even get the shakes or something? I don't know. You might have some physical reaction. Start to notice what your body does when certain things happen in your life. And that's going to give you an indication of what's going on in your heart. Okay, so there's a lot of fear in shame. And so we have a fear of vulnerability, which is, I already mentioned, being seen by God, others, or even by ourselves. We don't even want to look at ourselves and see what's going on. We have a fear of success, as well as a fear of failure. So people who self-sabotage are part of that. If you self-sabotage a lot, it's because you're afraid of succeeding, but you're also afraid of failing. Fear of change could be an indication of shame. Fear of being out of control. That is definitely, if you're not in control, you can't control the circumstances around you, you may have a shame problem. Fear of being in a position of need or dependence on anyone else. And, not being able to receive help from other people. That's also a very potent indication of shame. Shame causes us to have an intense focus on ourselves. Sometimes with shame comes frequent depression, or compulsive or addictive habits. If shame is your problem, you may have very great difficulty in asking for favor or for help, as I mentioned, because it's too painful to receive from others. Part of that is about, I do not deserve to receive from other people, okay? If you have this feeling of inadequacy, of something is inherently wrong with me, then it also means that I'm not worthy to receive anything, okay? So if you feel like you're not worthy, receiving from other people is very difficult. Feeling tolerated rather than chosen. Oh, this has been a big one with me. I totally have been in so many situations where I just felt like this person is just tolerating me, even my own husband. And I remember one time saying to him, I really appreciate your putting up with me. And he kind of looked at me like, I'm not putting up with you. I love you. And, why are you saying that about yourself? And it was because I really had not dealt with shame. Needing to succeed. So even though you have a failure of succeeding, you need to succeed because you need to perform in order to be accepted, because performance orientation, those of us who have done Elijah House know what performance orientation is. Performance orientation is this intense need to be accepted, and we have to earn acceptance, okay? And again, boundary issues can indicate shame when you can't say no to other people, okay? Elijah House has a great teaching on shame, and they say they define it as a fear of being found out, exposed, a fear of being humiliated or rejected, fear of being abandoned, and fear of revealing ourselves to others. And I think of shame as a posture of hiding with our heads bowed down, fruitlessly trying to protect ourselves. So we are always in this position that's trying to, melt into the wall, cringe into the chair kind of thing. So if these or other symptoms are present in your life, you may be dealing with shame. And maybe you have other symptoms that I haven't enumerated here, and I would love to hear what those are, okay? But the heart of shame is essentially that it is a deep-seated negative belief of our unworthiness. And it's like a railroad track that our lives run on and that determines the course of our lives. So think about a railroad track. When that train is on the track, it's going to, wherever that track leads, that's where the train is going to go to. And if shame is your track, it's going to keep you on there, and it's going to determine what your life is going to be like and the quality of your life. So here's what I would challenge you to do. And I know that when we meet with our small group, we're going to talk about what are one or more of your symptoms of shame. So you might want to ask yourself right now this question: what is one symptom of shame in my life? And so I pray for you that you would be able to understand how shame has gripped your heart.